You've handed us quite a compelling stack of material today. It's all focused on Jim Caviezel, the actor, and his, well, frankly, grueling experience making the film The Passion of the Christ. And this isn't your standard Hollywood biography stuff, is it? The sources we've got are really drilling down into this unique journey he took. It's like this intersection of acting, really intense physical demands, and a deep spiritual commitment.
Yeah. The texts are just filled with themes of faith, sacrifice, and what they keep calling a divine calling. So for you listening, our mission here in this deep dive is pretty clear. We want to pull out the key insights from these sources that explain why this particular performance and, the whole process behind it seems to go beyond typical method acting. We're focusing on the sheer physical and internal demands the sources document. Okay, let's unpack this.
Okay. And what's fascinating here right from the start is how these sources frame the entire thing. They don't just talk about his preparation and what he endured on set as like professional dedication. No, they present it as a compelling, almost real-world narrative in itself. And it's a narrative that they explicitly say mirrors the deep Christian message of the film. Perseverance, sacrifice, unwavering love. It really sets the stage. Like, this was intended to be more than just a role for him, according to these accounts.
Definitely. And when we talk about commitment, we almost have to start with the physical side of it, because the sources, they list an astonishing amount of suffering. It's way beyond just a strenuous. We're talking about enduring like actual trauma for months on end.
Yeah.
The descriptions of him carrying the cross, for instance, they're really visceral. It wasn't some lightweight prop. The sources say it weighed, around 150 pounds? Something like that?
Yeah, depending on the specific shot. But yeah, a significant weight.
And he's carrying it up hills repeatedly. Just the sheer physical repetition, day in, day out, that requires incredible endurance.
And that physical strain was constantly made worse by the environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
The sources paint a really vivid picture of harsh weather, particularly the cold. They mention near freezing temperatures, these punishing winds they had in Italy while filming.
Yeah.
And the texts point out he actually suffered from hypothermia. Not just once, but multiple times, apparently.
Wow.
So he's dealing with real physical breakdown, not just discomfort.
And it gets even more specific and, frankly, kind of shocking. The sources spend a lot of time detailing the actual on-set injuries, stuff that needed real medical help, not just, makeup. Like during the scourging scene, the lashing scene, apparently he was accidentally hit for real twice.
That's what they report. Yeah, an equipment issue, I think, and it left actual open wounds.
Just brutal.
And then there are other things that consistently pop up in the material, things the sources treat as almost, miraculous or at least deeply symbolic, like he dislocated his shoulder while carrying that cross.
Right, I saw that mentioned.
And then separately was actually struck by lightning during filming.
Struck by lightning. Seriously.
That's the account, yeah. And if we connect this to the bigger picture the sources are building, well, these aren't just random accidents in their narrative. They become sort of proof points, evidence that the actor's experience was somehow fundamentally linked to the suffering of the character he was playing. The sources really use this hardship to kind of elevate the film's thematic weight.
That distinction you made between just accidents and symbolic proof that feels really crucial for understanding this whole deep dive. The physical demands weren't just about making it look real. From the perspective of these sources, they were almost like a prerequisite, a requirement for him to truly embody the message. It really highlights how these extreme conditions are used to lift the story beyond just filmmaking and ask you, the listener, to think about what perseverance really means.
Exactly. The source material isn't subtle about it at all. It really sets up this duality in the performance. You have the physical sacrifice demanded of the actor, the person, Jim Caviezel, and that's presented as mirroring the spiritual sacrifice that the role itself, Jesus, represents. So this real physical pain becomes almost a dramatic tool that the sources use to hammer home this idea of ultimate love and endurance.
Okay, so we've established the external demands were just extreme. But, as brutal as all that was, the sources seem to suggest the real driving force behind the performance wasn't just muscle or technique. It was his internal preparation, his devotion. Let's maybe shift to what he was doing between the takes.
Yeah, because our sources consistently bring this up. It's a crucial detail and not exactly typical for an actor. They say Caviezel was actively praying, often in Aramaic apparently, and engaging in intense spiritual reflection, reading scripture right there on set between takes. This wasn't just, resting or going over lines. It was described as this active, ongoing spiritual practice woven right into the workday. And this is really where that concept of divine calling takes root, according to these documents we looked at. The sources describe the performance that resulted and his whole journey through the film as being, well, reflective, deeply emotional, profoundly moving. And they attribute that directly to this constant internal devotion. They really stress that the intensity people felt watching it came from a place of genuine, continuous spiritual engagement on his part.
And it's not just the writers interpreting his quiet moments either, is it? The sources back this up by confirming that this emotional and spiritual foundation, it's something the actor himself talks about. They include actual quotes from Caviezel's interviews. He's talking specifically about his faith, about sacrifice, and about his belief that taking on this role was, for him, a calling.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, his own words, his commentary provides the critical lens for understanding the sheer scope of the preparation involved. He didn't seem to see himself as just, an actor hired for a job. He repeatedly used language like being chosen or called to do this specific thing. So his personal investment, his deep belief system, that sources presented as absolutely integral, maybe even essential for reaching the kind of emotional depth they describe. It's like his personal faith validated enduring the extreme physical side.
So it feels like we arrive at this core synthesis then. Caviezel's preparation, as described here, wasn't just physical method acting in the usual sense, which often focuses more on psychological identification. Instead, the picture painted is of this really integrated experience. Combined dramatic commitment, yes, but also profound spiritual inspiration and just sheer real-world endurance. And for him, it sounds like the line between his job and his devotion got very blurry. And for you listening, I think this really shows the unique power that can happen when the demands of a role align so perfectly with the deepest personal convictions of the person playing it. It's a pretty unusual case study in commitment, where the immense physical cost was, it seems, accepted, maybe even welcomed as part of what he saw as a higher mission.
And this raises an important question, doesn't it? When we look at, the boundaries of performance, the ethics of commitment, especially in art, the sources specifically use the language of divine calling and sacrifice to define his commitment. And that implies a level of required intensity, maybe even personal suffering, that goes far beyond what you'd normally expect on a film set.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So we kind of have to view this level of personal prep not just as extreme dedication, which it was, but as presented in the sources, a unique spiritual journey he undertook in service of the film's message. It's this blending of the man and the mission, where the spiritual text itself became his acting preparation. And that seems to have created this profoundly singular result, one that the sources keep pointing to as uniquely moving precisely because of the depth of real sacrifice involved.
Right. That alignment really feels like the ultimate takeaway here. That powerful connection when someone's personal beliefs, their faith, what they feel is their calling, meshes perfectly with the huge demands of their professional task. The sources definitely make a strong case that the performance they captured felt so moving, so reflective, so spiritual, because the actor himself approached it not just as a role, but as this transformative spiritual act of dedication.
Which leaves us with something interesting to think about, doesn't it? Especially when we consider the sometimes intense demands placed on performers. When an actor takes on a role that requires such profound physical and emotional sacrifice, like the sources describe here, and they personally define that experience as a divine calling. Where exactly is the line? Where does deep acting immersion end and a genuine personal, perhaps spiritual experience begin? The material we looked at suggests that for Caviezel in this instance, maybe those boundaries just dissolved entirely.